The moment Caleb Wright's wedding ring hit the pawn shop counter, the gold didn't just glint under fluorescent lights. It screamed of everything he'd lost. His wife, his career, his pride. Now, with his 6-year-old daughter sleeping in a freezing apartment and medical bills burying him alive, he was selling the last piece of his old life for barely enough to keep the lights on another week. What he didn't know was that a billionaire standing 15 feet away was about to change everything. Not with charity, but with a question that would shatter every assumption Caleb had about worth, failure, and second chances. If this story touches you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Caleb's journey reaches across the world. The rain hammered West Side Pond like it had a personal vendetta against the cracked neon sign that buzzed and flickered in the November gloom. Caleb Wright stood outside the shop for 3 full minutes, water soaking through his second-hand jacket, staring at the barred windows and trying to convince himself there was another way. There wasn't. His daughter Emma had woken up coughing again that morning, the kind of cough that rattled in her small chest and made her eyes water with the effort of breathing. The pediatrician had been clear 6 months ago. The asthma medications weren't optional. Neither was the specialist. Neither was keeping the apartment warm enough that a 6-year-old girl didn't spend winter nights shivering under every blanket they owned. Caleb's phone buzzed in his pocket. He already knew what it was, the 3rd notice from the utility company. Disconnect scheduled for Friday. Today was Wednesday. He pulled the ring from his pocket and held it up to the failing daylight. White gold, simple band, worn thin from 5 years of marriage and 2 years of widowhood. Sarah had slipped it onto his finger in a courthouse ceremony, both of them grinning like idiots because they couldn't afford anything fancier, and didn't care. She died 16 months later, cancer tearing through her body faster than any doctor predicted, leaving Caleb with a toddler and debt that had metastasized into its own terminal disease. The ring caught the light one last time. Then Caleb pushed open the door. The shop smelled like desperation and old leather. Guitars hung on one wall, their strings dusty and slack. Glass cases displayed everything people had loved enough to buy and needed money badly enough to surrender. Cameras, watches, jewelry that told 1,000 stories of slow collapse. A television in the corner played a muted basketball game. Behind the counter, Vernon Pike looked up from his phone with the expression of a man perpetually disappointed by humanity. "Help you?" Vernon's voice carried the cigarette rasp of someone who'd been smoking since childhood and planned to continue until the grave. Caleb approached the counter, his shoes squeaking on linoleum that hadn't been replaced since the 80s. "Need to sell something." "Don't we all?" Vernon set his phone down. "What have you got?" Caleb placed the ring on the counter. Vernon picked it up without ceremony, squinting at it under a jeweler's loupe he produced from somewhere beneath the register. He turned it twice, scraped the inside with his thumbnail, then set it on a small electronic scale. "White gold, yeah, worn pretty thin, 3.2 grams. Vernon tapped something into an ancient calculator. "I'll give you $45. The number hit Caleb like a fist to the sternum. He'd known it wouldn't be much. He'd looked up scrap gold prices online, but hearing the actual amount made the walls feel closer, the air thinner. $45 wouldn't cover the electric bill. It wouldn't pay for Emma's next prescription refill. It would barely buy groceries for a week. "It's worth more than that," Caleb said quietly. Vernon shrugged. "To you, maybe. To me, it's 3 grams of scrap. Take it or leave it." Caleb stared at the ring, remembered Sarah's fingers, slim and strong, sliding it onto his hand. Remembered her laugh, bright and unstoppable even when the diagnosis came. Remembered the weight of her in the hospital bed at the end, so light he could have carried her anywhere except where she needed to go. "I'll take it," he said. "Smart man." Vernon pulled out a form. "Need your ID and a thumbprint." While Caleb dug his wallet from his pocket, the bell over the door chimed. He didn't look up, didn't care who else was surrendering pieces of their life today. Vernon's eyes shifted to the newcomer, and something changed in his expression. Not quite respect, but close. Recognition, maybe. Caution. "Mr. Hale," Vernon said, his voice losing its casual contempt. "Wasn't expecting you until later." "My meeting finished early." The voice was cultured, controlled, the kind of voice that never had to raise itself to be heard. "I'll wait." Caleb pressed his thumb onto the ink pad Vernon slid across the counter, then onto the form. His information looked pathetic in the harsh fluorescent light. Caleb Wright, age 36, current address in the Riverside Apartments, the complex where maintenance ignored work orders, and the playground equipment had been broken since summer. Vernon counted out $45 in fives and ones, making a show of it like he was doing Caleb a favor. "There you go. Pleasure doing business." Caleb took the money, looked at the ring one last time, sitting on Vernon's counter like it had never meant anything at all. "Actually," Vernon said, his voice sliding into something uglier, "looking at it again, the wear pattern's pretty bad. Market's down too. I'm thinking 40's more fair." Caleb's hands tightened on the bills. "You already agreed to 45. My shop, my rules." Vernon's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "You can take 40, or you can take your ring and walk. Your choice." The injustice of it burned in Caleb's throat. $5. The man was trying to claw back $5 from someone selling a wedding ring to keep his lights on. But arguing would take time Caleb didn't have, and pride was a luxury for people who could afford it. "Fine." Caleb set a $5 bill on the counter. Vernon pocketed it with a smirk. "See? Everything works out." Caleb turned toward the door, the $40 in his pocket feeling lighter than air, worth even less than the weight suggested. He was 2 steps from escape when that cultured voice spoke again. "Mr. Pike?" Vernon looked up. "Yes, Mr. Hale?" "That transaction we just witnessed." The words were measured, precise. "What was the agreed price?" A pause. Caleb stopped walking. 45, Vernon said carefully. "And what did you pay?" Vernon's smile flickered. "We renegotiated." "No." The single word carried absolute certainty. "You agreed to terms, then changed them when you believed the other party had no recourse. That's not negotiation. That's theft." Caleb turned. The man standing near the vintage watch display was perhaps 60, wearing a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly rent. His hair was steel gray, cut with precision, and his eyes were the pale blue of winter sky, cold, clear, and assessing. He looked at Vernon the way someone might examine a particularly disappointing quarterly report. "Mr. Hale, I didn't mean—" "Give him his $5. It wasn't a request. Vernon pulled the bill from his pocket and set it on the counter. "Of course. My mistake." Caleb walked back, took the 5, and met the older man's eyes briefly. "Thank you." The man nodded once. Caleb left. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Caleb stood under the pawn shop awning, trying to figure out how to make $45 stretch across the gap between survival and collapse. The math didn't work. It never worked. Every time he plugged one hole, 2 more opened. Medical bills, rent, food, electricity, Emma's medications. The cost stacked like a tower that grew faster than he could climb. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out. Reminder. Specialist appointment tomorrow, 2 p.m. Please confirm. Caleb closed his eyes. The appointment he couldn't afford. For the specialist Emma needed, to manage the condition that made every breath a struggle when the cold settled in. Behind him, the pawn shop door opened. "Excuse me." Caleb turned. The older man, Mr. Hale, stood in the doorway, his overcoat spotted with rain. "I'm sorry," Caleb said. "I didn't mean to." "You did nothing wrong." Hale stepped out under the awning. "I wanted to ask you something." Caleb waited. "That ring meant something to you." It wasn't a question, but Caleb answered anyway. "My wife gave it to me. She died 2 years ago." "I'm sorry." Hale's expression didn't change, but something in his voice suggested he understood loss. "Yet you sold it without argument, without trying to negotiate a better price. Why?" Caleb looked at the rain. "Because arguing wouldn't have changed the number, and I don't have time to waste. Most people would have fought anyway. Pride, if nothing else." "Pride doesn't keep the lights on." Hale was quiet for a moment. "What do you do for work?" The question felt like a trap, but Caleb was too tired to navigate around it. "Right now, whatever pays. Temp agencies, mostly. Day labor when I can get it." "Before that?" Caleb hesitated. This was where people's eyes changed, where they stopped seeing potential and started seeing failure. I was an aerospace engineer, worked for Morrison Dynamics until the layoffs 3 years ago. Since then, he shrugged. Since then, nothing in my field. Economy's tight. Companies want younger, cheaper, more desperate. And you're not desperate? Caleb looked at him directly. I'm selling my wedding ring for $45. What do you think? To his surprise, Hale almost smiled. I think you're honest. That's rarer than you'd imagine. He pulled a business card from his coat pocket. My name is Richard Hale. I own several companies, including a defense contractor that does extensive work in aerospace systems. We're always looking for qualified engineers. Caleb took the card. The paper was heavy, expensive. Hale Industries. Richard Hale, CEO. I appreciate it, Caleb said, but I've sent out hundreds of applications. Nobody's interested in an engineer who's been out of the field for 3 years. Perhaps they weren't asking the right questions. Hale buttoned his coat. I saw something in that shop that interested me. Not the ring. The man selling it. You accepted an unfair deal without complaint, but you didn't grovel. You didn't make excuses. When Pike tried to cheat you further, you adapted. That's the kind of character I look for. With respect, Mr. Hale, character doesn't show up on a resume. No. It shows up in moments like these. Hale nodded toward the card. Call that number tomorrow. Ask for Margaret in HR. She'll expect your call. Before Caleb could respond, Hale walked away, disappearing around the corner into the rain. Caleb stood there holding the card, trying to process what had just happened. People didn't offer jobs in pawn shop parking lots. Billionaires didn't intervene in $5 disputes for strangers. This had to be some kind of mistake, or pity, or... His phone buzzed. Final notice. Account past due. Service disconnection scheduled 11:15. Caleb looked at the card again, at the embossed letters, at a possibility so fragile he was afraid to believe in it. Then he put it carefully in his wallet and started the long walk home. The Riverside apartments looked worse in the rain. The building's beige paint had given up years ago, surrendering to water stains and mold that crept up from the foundation like a slow invasion. The parking lot was more pothole than pavement. Someone's broken-down sedan sat on blocks near the dumpsters, gutted for parts and left to rust. Caleb climbed the exterior stairs to the 3rd floor, avoiding the spots where the railing wobbled loose from the concrete. Apartment 3C. Home. He unlocked the door as quietly as possible. Inside, the living room was dark, except for the glow from the kitchen nightlight. The apartment was small. Living room, kitchenette, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and cold despite the space heater running in the corner. Caleb had set the thermostat to 60 to save money, which meant wearing layers indoors and piling blankets on Emma at night. Daddy? Emma stood in the bedroom doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant. She was small for 6, all knees and elbows, with Sarah's dark hair and Caleb's gray eyes. She wore her winter pajamas and 2 pairs of socks. Hey, baby girl. Caleb crossed to her, kneeling to her level. What are you doing up? Couldn't sleep. Mrs. Chen was watching me, but she had to go home. Emma coughed, the sound rattling. Are you okay? Caleb pulled her into a hug, feeling how thin she was, how fragile. I'm fine. Everything's fine. You were gone a long time. I know. I'm sorry. He stood, lifting her easily. Let's get you back to bed. He carried her to the bedroom they shared. Emma had the twin bed, Caleb slept on a mattress on the floor, and tucked her in under 3 blankets. The room was slightly warmer than the rest of the apartment, thanks to the door being closed and Emma's small space heater, which Caleb only ran when she was sleeping. Daddy? Emma looked up at him with serious eyes. Are we going to be okay? The question broke his heart every time she asked it, which was getting more frequent. She was too young to understand their situation completely, but smart enough to sense the edges of it, the worry in his voice, the cheap food, the cold apartment. Yes, Caleb said firmly. We're going to be okay. I promise. How do you know? Because I have to make it true, Caleb thought. Because the alternative is unacceptable. Because you deserve better than this, and I'll do whatever it takes to give it to you. Because we've gotten through everything else, he said instead. And we'll get through this too, together. Emma yawned. Okay, I believe you. Caleb kissed her forehead. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. We've got your doctor appointment. Will I have to get a shot? Maybe. But you're brave, remember? Braver than dragons, Emma murmured, her eyes already closing. Braver than dragons, Caleb confirmed. He waited until her breathing deepened, then slipped out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. In the kitchen, Caleb spread the $45 on the counter and looked at his phone's calculator. Electric bill, $63 minimum payment. Emma's prescription refill, $32. Groceries, maybe $60 if he was careful. Gas. Needed at least $20 to get to the temp agency and back for the rest of the week. The math was brutal. Even with the ring money, he was short. Again. Caleb opened his laptop, a 6-year-old machine that took 3 minutes to boot up, and logged into his bank account. Balance, $127.43. With the $45 from today, that brought him to $172.43. Enough to keep the lights on and fill Emma's prescription. Not enough for everything else. He pulled up his email. 17 new messages, mostly automated rejections from job applications. One caught his eye. Warehouse associate position. Dear Mr. Wright, thank you for your interest in the warehouse associate role. Unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely matches our needs. Caleb deleted it, added it to the mental count of rejections that had stopped stinging months ago. Then he pulled out Richard Hale's business card. The cardstock was thick, professionally printed. Hale Industries. Multiple divisions listed in small print: defense systems, aerospace engineering, advanced materials, corporate security. At the bottom, excellence through integrity. Caleb turned the card over. On the back, handwritten in precise script, Margaret Chen, Extremer 2847. Call after 9 a.m. It felt impossible. Too convenient. Too good. Men like Richard Hale didn't hand out business cards to strangers in pawn shops. They didn't offer jobs to desperate fathers who'd been out of their field for years. This had to be some kind of mistake. Or worse, pity dressed up as opportunity. But impossible or not, Caleb would make the call. Because impossible was better than nothing, and nothing was what he had right now. He set the card carefully next to his laptop and started filling out the budget spreadsheet he updated every night, trying once again to make insufficient numbers cover impossible needs. Morning came too early, gray light filtering through curtains Caleb had never gotten around to replacing. Emma was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of generic cereal and a library book about dolphins. She coughed twice while reading, the sound still rough. Morning, sweetheart. Caleb started the coffee maker, which gurgled and hissed like it was personally offended by its existence. Morning, Daddy. Is today the doctor? This afternoon, but first I need to make an important phone call. Caleb glanced at the clock. 8:47. Respectable enough. Emma ate another spoonful of cereal. About a job? Maybe. We'll see. I hope you get it. Then we could get a warmer apartment. Caleb's chest tightened. This apartment's fine. It's cold, and the bathroom sink doesn't work right, and Mrs. Patterson downstairs says we should complain to the landlord about the mold. Mrs. Patterson should mind her own business. Emma looked up, startled by the edge in his voice. Caleb softened immediately. Sorry, baby. I didn't mean it like that. Mrs. Patterson's right. We should complain. He stopped. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that complaining to the landlord means risking eviction? That being right doesn't matter when you're poor? That standing up for yourself is a luxury they can't afford? I'll take care of it, he said instead. At 9:03, Caleb dialed the number on Hale's card. His hands were steadier than he expected. Hale Industries. How may I direct your call? The receptionist sounded professionally pleasant. Margaret Chen, please. Extension 2847. One moment. Hold music. Something classical and vaguely triumphant. Caleb paced the small kitchen while Emma watched him with worried eyes. Margaret Chen speaking. The voice was warm, efficient. Caleb straightened unconsciously. Ms. Chen, my name is Caleb Wright. Richard Hale told me to call you this morning about Mr. Wright, yes. Mr. Hale briefed me last night. Can you come in today for an interview? Caleb's heart jumped. I have an appointment at 2, but I could come afterward, say 3:30? 3:30 works perfectly. Do you have our address? I can look it up. Excellent. Come to the main building, 5th floor. Security will direct you. A pause. Mr. Wright, I should mention, Mr. Hale doesn't make these kinds of referrals often. When he does, we take them very seriously. I understand. Thank you. See you this afternoon. The line went dead. Caleb stood in his kitchen, phone in hand, afraid to believe what had just happened. Did you get it? Emma asked. I got an interview. That's not the same as getting the job. But it's close, right? Caleb looked at his daughter, at the hope in her eyes that he'd spent 2 years trying not to extinguish. It's closer than we've been in a while. The pediatric pulmonologist's office was in a medical plaza 20 minutes from their apartment. Caleb had Emma bundled in her winter coat, even though it was barely November, couldn't risk her getting sicker before they saw the doctor. The waiting room was full of children and worried parents. Caleb checked in with the receptionist, who frowned at her computer screen. Mr. Wright, I'm showing an outstanding balance of $460 on your account. Caleb had known this was coming. I'm working on it. I can make a payment today. He pulled out $20 from the $45. It was money he couldn't spare, but not paying anything would risk them refusing to see Emma. The receptionist looked at the $20 like it was an insult. Our policy requires a minimum payment of $100 for patients with balances over $300. I don't have $100. Then I'm afraid we can't see Emma today. Caleb leaned closer to the desk, keeping his voice low so Emma wouldn't hear. My daughter has asthma. She's been coughing for 3 days. She needs to see the doctor. I understand, Mr. Wright, but your policy is going to send a 6-year-old home without treatment? The receptionist's expression didn't change. She'd heard this argument before from other desperate parents, and policy was policy. I can schedule you for next week if you can bring the minimum payment. Behind Caleb, Emma coughed, a deep rattling sound that made the other parents look over. The receptionist softened slightly. There's a free clinic on 7th Street. They might be able to help. Caleb stared at her, thought about arguing further, realized it was pointless. Thank you for your time. He took Emma's hand and walked out. In the parking lot, Emma looked up at him. I don't get to see the doctor? Not today, baby, but we'll figure something out. Because of money? Caleb unlocked the car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic with 200,000 miles and a cracked windshield. It's complicated. It's always about money, Emma said quietly, climbing into the back seat. Caleb had no response to that, because she was absolutely right. Hale Industries occupied a gleaming glass tower in the business district, the kind of building Caleb used to work in before the world fell apart. He parked in visitor parking, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, outdated tie, worn dress shirt, jacket with a small stain he'd tried to hide, and decided it would have to be good enough. Emma was with Mrs. Chen from down the hall, who'd agreed to watch her for 2 hours in exchange for Caleb fixing her leaky faucet this weekend. Everything was barter now. Everything had a cost. The lobby was impressive. Marble floors, soaring ceiling, a reception desk staffed by 2 people who looked like they'd never worried about money in their lives. Caleb approached nervously. I have an appointment with Margaret Chen, 3rd floor. The younger receptionist checked her computer. Caleb Wright? Yes. 5th floor, actually. Take the elevator on the right. Caleb rode up with 3 people in expensive suits who talked about quarterly projections and didn't look at him once. He was invisible to them, which was fine. He'd gotten good at being invisible. The 5th floor was quieter, carpeted in deep blue, with art on the walls that probably cost more than Caleb's annual income. The directory pointed him to human resources. He followed signs to a glass-walled office where a woman in her 50s looked up from her desk and smiled. Mr. Wright? Yes, ma'am. Margaret Chen, please, come in. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. The office was organized, professional, with diplomas on the wall and a photo of 3 grown children. Margaret Chen had kind eyes and the air of someone who'd seen enough of life to have perspective. "Thank you for seeing me," Caleb said, sitting carefully. "Of course. As I mentioned on the phone, Mr. Hale spoke highly of you. That's unusual. He's extraordinarily selective about personal recommendations." She opened a folder. "I pulled your resume from our system. You applied for 3 positions over the past year." Caleb nodded. "Aerospace engineering roles primarily. I never heard back. Our automated system likely filtered you out due to the employment gap. That's one of the flaws of algorithmic screening. It can't account for context." She looked at him directly. "Tell me about that gap." Here it was, the explanation Caleb had delivered dozens of times, watching interest die in interviewers' eyes. "I was with Morrison Dynamics for 8 years, working on UAV navigation systems. They downsized in 2022, cut 40% of engineering staff. I was part of that wave." He kept his voice factual, professional. "My wife was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer around the same time. She died 6 months later. I had a young daughter to care for, medical bills to manage. I took whatever work I could get to stay afloat." Margaret's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. Not pity. Understanding, maybe. That must have been extraordinarily difficult. It was what it was. Caleb didn't want sympathy. Sympathy didn't lead to job offers. "Mr. Hale mentioned you were selling a wedding ring when he encountered you. May I ask why?" Caleb met her gaze. "My daughter needs asthma medication. The utility company is threatening disconnection. I needed money. And now? Now I still need money, but I also need a job, a real one, something I can build on. I'm good at what I do, Ms. Chen. I know my resume doesn't show it, but I can still design systems, solve problems, deliver results. I just need someone to give me the chance to prove it." Margaret was quiet for a moment, then she closed the folder. "Mr. Wright, I'm going to be direct with you. We have several entry-level engineering positions available, but they typically require recent experience and pay accordingly. Starting salary would be around $65,000. $65,000. It might as well have been $1 million. It was more than Caleb had made in the past 2 years combined. However," Margaret continued, "Mr. Hale suggested something different. We have a senior engineering position in our aerospace division, Advanced Propulsion Systems Development. It pays $95,000 to start, with full benefits, including comprehensive health coverage." Caleb's breath caught. That's incredibly generous, but it's not generosity. It's strategic. Mr. Hale believes you have the character and capability for this role, but he also wants to ensure it's the right fit. Margaret pulled out a different form. He's proposing a 3-month probationary period. During that time, you'll work as a contractor at $75,000 annually, prorated. If you perform well, the position becomes permanent at the full salary. If not, we part ways professionally. What's the catch? Margaret smiled slightly. The catch is that you'll be working on classified defense projects under intense scrutiny. The catch is that excellence is expected, not hoped for. The catch is that Mr. Hale has extended a remarkable opportunity, and failing to meet its standards would be noted. But there's no trap here, Mr. Wright, just a chance to prove what you're capable of. Caleb looked at the form, at the numbers, at the possibility of Emma seeing a real doctor, living in a warm apartment, having the childhood she deserved. When would I start? Tomorrow, if you're available. We'll need to run a background check and get you security clearance, but Mr. Hale has expedited the process. Caleb thought about Emma, waiting at home, about the electric bill due Friday, about 2 years of grinding poverty and quiet desperation. I'm available, he said. Margaret extended her hand. Welcome to Hale Industries, Mr. Wright. I think you're going to do very well here. Caleb shook her hand, barely trusting himself to speak. He'd walked into a pawn shop yesterday, prepared to sell the last piece of his past for $45. Today, he was walking out of an office tower with a future. Caleb sat in his car in the Hale Industries parking lot for 10 full minutes, staring at the employment contract Margaret Chen had given him. The numbers looked surreal on paper, $75,000 annually, prorated over 3 months. Even divided, it was more money than he'd seen in 2 years. His hands trembled slightly as he folded the papers and tucked them into his jacket pocket. The drive back to Riverside Apartments felt different. The potholes were still there, the traffic still crawled, but Caleb's chest felt lighter than it had in months. He kept touching the contract through his jacket, making sure it was real, that he hadn't imagined the entire conversation. Mrs. Chen answered her door on the second knock, Emma visible behind her at the kitchen table working on a coloring book. "Daddy!" Emma jumped up, running over. "Did you get the job?" Caleb lifted her into his arms. "I got the job," Emma squealed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Mrs. Chen smiled from the doorway, her weathered face crinkling with genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful news, Mr. Wright. I'm very happy for you both." "Thank you for watching her, Mrs. Chen. I'll come by Saturday to fix that faucet, I promise." "No rush, no rush. You focus on that new job." She patted Emma's shoulder. "This one was very good. Read to me about dolphins for an hour." Back in their apartment, Emma bounced with questions while Caleb heated up canned soup for dinner. Still the cheapest option, but not for much longer, he reminded himself. "When do you start? What will you do? Will you wear a suit? Can we get a new apartment?" "I start tomorrow. I'll be working on airplane systems like I used to, and yes, eventually we can look at a better place." Caleb stirred the soup, watching steam rise. "But first we need to catch up on bills and make sure we're stable." Emma nodded seriously. "Stable is good. That means not worried all the time, right?" "Right." Caleb poured soup into bowls. "It means not worried all the time." That night, after Emma fell asleep, Caleb sat at his laptop and did something he hadn't allowed himself to do in months. He planned. Not just survived, but actually planned. Pay the electric bill immediately. Fill Emma's prescriptions. Schedule the specialist appointment. Build up a small emergency fund. Then, maybe, start looking at apartments with heat that worked and bathrooms without mold. The possibilities felt overwhelming after so long in pure survival mode. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Caleb answered warily. "Mr. Wright, this is Richard Hale." Caleb sat up straighter automatically. "Mr. Hale, I wanted to thank you for—" "Margaret tells me you accepted the position." "Yes, sir. I start tomorrow." "Good." Hale's voice was measured, impossible to read. "I want to be clear about something. This opportunity isn't charity. I don't believe in charity. It creates dependency and resentment. This is a business decision based on what I observed about your character." "I understand." "Do you?" Hale paused. "Many people in your situation would have begged in that pawn shop, would have told stories, made excuses, tried to extract sympathy. You did none of those things. You accepted an unfair situation with dignity, adapted when it became worse, and walked away without complaint. That tells me more about who you are than any resume." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. "Tomorrow you'll meet David Chen, our head of aerospace development. He's brilliant, demanding, and doesn't tolerate mediocrity. He also doesn't know why you're being hired, just that you're a probationary contractor with relevant experience. I want you to prove yourself on merit, not on my recommendation. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "We'll see. One more thing, Mr. Wright. I noticed you left my office before we concluded our business at the pawn shop. Vernon has something that belongs to you." Caleb's chest tightened. "Mr. Hale, I can't accept—" "You already sold it. I bought it. What I do with my property is my concern." Hale's tone softened slightly. "Some things shouldn't be surrendered, even when circumstances demand it. Consider it a loan, if that makes it easier. You can repay me when you're on your feet." The line went dead before Caleb could respond. The next morning, Caleb dropped Emma at school. She'd hugged him extra tight, whispering, "Good luck, Daddy," into his shoulder, and drove to Hale Industries with his stomach in knots. The guard at the parking garage checked his name against a list and directed him to visitor parking. Temporary badge. First day. The fifth floor looked different in morning light, busier. People moved with purpose through hallways, carrying tablets and coffee, discussing projects and technical shorthand. Caleb followed the directions Margaret had emailed him to Conference Room 5B, where 3 people were already seated around a glass table. David Chen looked up as Caleb entered. He was perhaps 45, with sharp eyes behind rimless glasses and the lean build of someone who forgot to eat when focused on problems. Caleb Wright? Chen's handshake was firm, assessing. I'm David Chen, Aerospace Division Head. This is Jennifer Reeves, Senior Systems Engineer, and Marcus Hall, our Lead Propulsion Specialist. Caleb shook hands with both. Jennifer was younger, maybe early 30s, with the confident air of someone who'd earned respect in a male-dominated field. Marcus was older, 50s, with graying temples and the weathered look of an engineer who'd spent time in hangars and test facilities. Have a seat, Chen said. Margaret sent over your resume. Morrison Dynamics UAV navigation systems. Good work, from what I understand, before they imploded. Thank you. But you've been out of active engineering for almost 3 years. That's a significant gap in a field that moves as fast as ours. Chen's tone wasn't hostile, just factual. We're working on next-generation propulsion systems for classified defense applications. The learning curve is steep, even for people who've stayed current. What makes you think you can contribute here? It was a fair question. Caleb had asked himself the same thing a dozen times since yesterday. I don't know if I can yet, Caleb said honestly, but I'm good at systems thinking, at seeing how components interact. That skill doesn't expire, and I'm willing to work harder than anyone else in this room to prove I belong here. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. Marcus made a note on his tablet. Chen's expression didn't change. We'll see. Jennifer, bring him up to speed on the hybrid propulsion project. Marcus, I want you to review his technical assessments by end of week. If he's as good as his background suggests, we'll integrate him fully. If not, Chen shrugged. 3 months is a reasonable trial period. The meeting dissolved. Jennifer gestured for Caleb to follow her down the hallway to an open workspace where 24 engineers sat at standing desks surrounded by monitors, whiteboards covered in equations, and 3D models rotating on screens. Welcome to the chaos, Jennifer said. Coffee's in the break room, bathrooms that way, and we don't do small talk when we're debugging code. Questions? Where do I sit? Jennifer pointed to an empty desk near the windows. There. Login credentials should be in your email. First assignment is to review the last 6 months of design iterations on our hybrid thrust vectoring system and identify any potential failure points we might have missed. Think you can handle that? Caleb looked at the desk, the monitors, the workspace that hummed with focused energy. This was what he'd been missing. The intellectual challenge, the collaborative problem-solving, the sense of building something that mattered. I can handle it. Good. Because we're presenting to the Pentagon in 6 weeks, and if this system doesn't perform flawlessly, we lose a $300 million contract. Jennifer's smile was tight. No pressure. Caleb spent the first 4 hours drowning in technical documentation. The hybrid propulsion system was elegant and ambitious, combining traditional jet thrust with an experimental electromagnetic acceleration component that could theoretically double range while halving fuel consumption. But the design was complex, with hundreds of integration points where things could go wrong. He took notes on a legal pad, old school, sketching out system diagrams and highlighting areas that felt unstable. Around noon, Marcus stopped by his desk. How's the reading going? It's brilliant work, Caleb said carefully. But I have some concerns about the thermal management system during the transition phase between thrust modes. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Such as? Caleb pulled up a schematic on his monitor. Here, in the electromagnetic acceleration phase, you're generating massive heat in a very short window. The current cooling system assumes gradual thermal buildup, but if the transition happens faster than modeled, say, in emergency combat maneuvers, you could hit cascade failure temperatures before the coolant cycle compensates. Marcus studied the screen. We ran thermal simulations on that transition. They came back clean. What were the simulation parameters? Standard combat maneuvers, 30-second transition window? What about a 10-second emergency transition, or a 5-second abort scenario? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up a chair. Show me what you're seeing. They spent the next hour running numbers, building new simulation models, testing edge cases. Jennifer joined them halfway through, then David Chen appeared at the end, watching silently as Caleb walked them through his analysis. If I'm right, Caleb concluded, you need a redundant cooling system that activates preemptively during any rapid transition. It adds weight and complexity, but it prevents catastrophic failure. Chen crossed his arms. That redundancy will cost us 3 weeks and push us closer to the deadline. Better 3 weeks late than presenting a system that fails in field conditions, Caleb said. The room was silent. Caleb realized he'd just contradicted the division head on his first day. Before he could backtrack, Chen nodded. You're right. Marcus, pull together a team to redesign the cooling system. Jennifer, update the timeline and notify the client we're addressing a critical safety concern. Right? Chen looked at Caleb directly. Good catch. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. After Chen left, Jennifer leaned against Caleb's desk. Well, that was either very brave or very stupid. Probably stupid, Caleb admitted. Maybe. But you were right, which counts for something. She smiled slightly. Chen doesn't give compliments lightly. You just made an impression. That evening, Caleb picked up Emma from after-school care, another expense he could finally afford, and stopped at the pharmacy to fill her prescriptions. No negotiating, no rationing, just handed over his credit card and took the full medication regimen the doctor had prescribed months ago. All set, Mr. Wright, the pharmacist said, bagging everything. That'll be $112. A month ago, that number would have been impossible. Today, Caleb paid it without flinching. In the car, Emma held the pharmacy bag like it contained treasure. Does this mean I can breathe better? That's the plan, sweetheart. And we can turn the heat up at home? Caleb started the engine. We can turn the heat up. Emma was quiet for a moment. Daddy, is everything really going to be okay now? Caleb looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, at the hope and residual fear in her expression. Yeah, baby, I think it really is. The next few weeks blurred together in a rhythm Caleb had almost forgotten. Actual work, intellectual challenges, colleagues who treated him as an equal. The redesigned cooling system came together ahead of schedule. Caleb found himself pulled into other projects, his systems analysis skills proving valuable across multiple teams. The paycheck hit his account on a Friday. Caleb stared at the number, $6,240.80. After taxes, exactly what the prorated contract promised, and felt something close to vertigo. More money than he'd earned in the previous 4 months combined. That weekend, he paid every overdue bill, electric, water, credit cards he'd been dodging, called the medical billing office and set up a payment plan they'd actually approve, scheduled Emma's specialist appointment without worrying about the cost. Sunday afternoon, he took Emma apartment hunting. The places in their budget were a universe away from Riverside. 2 bedrooms, working heat, appliances that functioned, buildings with maintenance staff who actually fixed things, playgrounds with equipment that wasn't broken. Emma walked through each unit with wide eyes, whispering like she was in a museum. At the third apartment, a 2-bedroom in a complex with a pool and a community center, she tugged on Caleb's sleeve. Can we really live here? The apartment was bright, clean, with fresh paint and carpet that didn't smell like mold. The kitchen had a dishwasher. The bathroom had a bathtub instead of just a narrow shower stall. The second bedroom had a closet big enough for Emma's clothes and toys, with space left over for a real desk. If you want to, Caleb said. Emma's face split into a smile so bright it hurt to look at. Yes, please. Caleb signed the lease that afternoon. Move-in date, 2 weeks. Security deposit and first month's rent took a significant bite from his first paycheck, but for the first time in years, Caleb could afford to spend money without the sick feeling of robbing tomorrow to pay for today. On Monday, David Chen called Caleb into his office. Close the door. Caleb's stomach dropped. Had he made a mistake? Overstepped somewhere? Chen's expression was unreadable. I spoke with Richard Hale this morning, Chen said. He wanted an assessment of your performance. Here it comes, Caleb thought, the too-good-to-be-true reality check. I told him you're one of the strongest systems engineers I've worked with in 15 years. Chen leaned back in his chair. Your analysis saved us from presenting a flawed design to the Pentagon. Your work on the thermal management redesign was exceptional, and you've integrated into the team faster than anyone expected. Caleb exhaled carefully. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. Chen pulled out a folder. Hale wanted to wait until the 3-month probation ended, but I convinced him that's unnecessary bureaucracy. As of today, you're a permanent employee. Full salary, full benefits, effective immediately. The numbers on the contract Chen slid across the desk made Caleb's vision blur slightly. 95,000. Health insurance that covered pre-existing conditions, 4 weeks paid vacation, retirement matching. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Chen extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Caleb. That night, Caleb called his daughter into the living room of their cold, cramped apartment and told her that everything was going to change. New apartment in 2 weeks, her own bedroom, a warm place to sleep. Money for doctor appointments, medications, anything she needed. Emma cried, which made Caleb cry, and they sat together on the threadbare couch, holding each other while the space heater rattled in the corner. I told you we'd be okay, Caleb whispered into her hair. You promised, Emma said, and you kept it. The following week, Caleb went back to Westside Pawn. Vernon Pike looked up from his phone with the same dismissive expression, not recognizing him at first. Then his eyes widened slightly. Help you? Vernon's tone was cautious now. I'm here to pick something up. Richard Hale left it for me. Vernon's jaw tightened, but he disappeared into the back room and returned with a small box. Inside, wrapped in velvet cloth, was Caleb's wedding ring. Caleb picked it up, feeling the familiar weight, the worn gold that had circled his finger through the best and worst moments of his life. The ring Sarah had given him. The ring he'd sold for $45 because survival left no room for sentiment. Mr. Hale paid $400 for this, Vernon said quietly. Said it was worth more than I offered you. Caleb slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, like it had never left. He was right. Outside, the autumn sun was setting, painting the pawn shop's cracked windows gold. Caleb stood on the sidewalk where Richard Hale had stopped him 4 weeks ago and asked a question that changed everything. What would you do if someone finally gave you a real chance? Caleb had answered for his daughter, for the possibility of a life beyond desperation. Now, with the ring back on his finger and a future spreading out before him like an open road, he finally understood what Hale had seen in that moment. Not charity, not pity, but the raw material of character, someone who could lose everything and still choose dignity over bitterness, honesty over manipulation, quiet strength over loud desperation. His phone buzzed, a text from Margaret Chen in HR. Mr. Hale would like to see you tomorrow, 9 a.m., his office. Congratulations on the permanent position. Caleb typed back, I'll be there. And thank you. He drove home through rush hour traffic, the ring solid on his finger, and for the first time in 3 years, Caleb Wright wasn't running calculations about how to stretch $20 across 7 days. Wasn't wondering which bill to pay and which to defer. Wasn't lying awake at night trying to solve impossible equations where the answer was always not enough. At Riverside Apartments, he parked and climbed the familiar stairs one last time. 2 more weeks and they'd be gone. 2 more weeks and Emma would sleep in a warm bedroom with her own closet and a window that wasn't cracked. Inside, Emma was at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen, working on homework. She looked up when Caleb entered, and her eyes went immediately to his hand. Daddy, your ring! Caleb held up his hand, letting her see. Someone thought it shouldn't be gone. Emma jumped up and hugged him. Does this mean Mommy's back with us? The question cracked something in Caleb's chest. Mommy's always with us, sweetheart, but the ring, yeah, it's back where it belongs. Mrs. Chen gathered her things quietly. I'll see you both later. Congratulations on everything, Mr. Wright. After she left, Caleb made dinner. Real food this time. Chicken and vegetables instead of canned soup, while Emma chattered about school. Her cough had improved dramatically since starting the new medications. Her color was better. She had energy again. Daddy? Emma said during dinner. When we move to the new apartment, can I have a friend over? Caleb's throat tightened. Emma had never invited friends over to Riverside, had been too embarrassed by the cold, the broken fixtures, the poverty that clung to every corner. You can have as many friends over as you want. And can we get a Christmas tree this year? A real one? It was only early November, but Caleb understood what she was asking. Last Christmas had been sparse, dollar store decorations, tiny gifts, no tree because they couldn't afford one, and the apartment was too cold anyway. We can get the biggest tree that fits in the living room. Emma's smile could have powered the whole building. That night, After she fell asleep, Caleb sat at his laptop and did something he hadn't done since Sarah died. He looked at photos from before. Their wedding day at the courthouse, both of them grinning like idiots. Sarah pregnant with Emma, glowing and exhausted. Emma's first birthday, cake smashed everywhere. The last good Christmas, before the diagnosis, when they'd still believed the future was guaranteed. Caleb touched the ring on his finger. Thought about the man who'd intervened in a pawn shop for no reason except that it was right. Who'd offered opportunity instead of charity. Who'd seen worth in someone the world had decided was worthless. Tomorrow he'd meet with Richard Hale. Would thank him properly. Would promise to prove that the faith placed in him wasn't misplaced. But tonight, Caleb just sat in the cold apartment that would soon be a memory, his daughter sleeping safely in the next room, his wedding ring back where it belonged, and let himself believe that the worst was finally over. The calculation that had defined the last 3 years, never enough, never enough, never enough, had finally shifted. Now the equation balanced, and tomorrow it would tip toward something better. Richard Hale's office occupied the entire top floor of the Hale Industries Tower, accessible only by a private elevator that required security clearance. Caleb stood in the elevator alone at 8:55 the next morning, watching the floor numbers climb and trying to steady his breathing. Through the glass walls, the city spread out below like a circuit board, all interconnected lines and pulsing energy. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that managed to feel both expensive and understated. Dark wood, leather furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses. A woman in her 60s sat behind a mahogany desk, her silver hair pulled back in a style that suggested she'd been Richard Hale's gatekeeper for decades. "Mr. Wright?" Her voice was polite but assessing. "Mr. Hale is expecting you. Go right in." The office beyond was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls offering panoramic views of the city. Richard Hale stood by the windows with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, studying something in the distance. He turned as Caleb entered. "Mr. Wright, thank you for coming." Hale gestured to a seating area near the windows, 2 leather chairs and a low table with a coffee service already prepared. "Please, sit. Coffee?" "Thank you." Caleb sat, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the space, the view, the casual wealth that surrounded him. Hale poured 2 cups with practiced efficiency and handed one to Caleb before settling into the opposite chair. Up close, in morning light, Hale looked older than Caleb had initially thought, perhaps mid-60s, with lines around his eyes that spoke of decades navigating high-stakes decisions. "David Chen tells me you've exceeded expectations," Hale said, without preamble. "Your analysis of the propulsion system potentially saved the company from a significant embarrassment. I was just doing the job you hired me for." "No, you were doing the job you're capable of, which is considerably more than what most people hired at your level deliver." Hale sipped his coffee. "That's the difference between competence and excellence. Competence meets expectations. Excellence redefines them." Caleb wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he focused on why he'd really come. "Mr. Hale, I wanted to thank you, not just for the job, but for—" He held up his left hand, the wedding ring catching the light. "For this, for seeing something worth preserving when I couldn't afford to keep it myself." Hale's expression softened slightly. "That ring represents a commitment you honored until circumstances forced your hand. Allowing it to disappear into Vernon Pike's inventory would have been a waste. Consider it returned to its rightful owner. I'd like to repay you for it. Eventually, perhaps, when you're stable. For now, focus on the work and on your daughter." Hale set his cup down. "I asked you here for 2 reasons. First, to formally congratulate you on your permanent position. Second, to discuss something that concerns me about this company." Caleb straightened slightly. "Sir?" "I built Hale Industries over 40 years, starting with a small manufacturing operation and expanding into defense, aerospace, advanced materials. We employ over 15,000 people across 6 divisions. Revenue last year exceeded $4 billion. Hale's voice was matter-of-fact, reciting numbers that would make most people's heads spin. "But success at this scale creates distance. I'm insulated from the reality of how most people experience this company. The executives who report to me are insulated. We make decisions that affect thousands of lives, but we rarely see those effects directly. I'm not sure I understand. 4 weeks ago, I watched a man sell his wedding ring for $45 to keep his daughter fed and warm. That man, you, had worked for one of our competitors doing the same type of engineering we desperately need. Our automated systems rejected your applications 3 times because you had an employment gap. The algorithm couldn't account for a dying wife, a young child, impossible choices. It just saw a gap and moved on. Caleb shifted in his chair. That's how most companies operate now. It's not personal. That's precisely the problem. It should be personal. Hale leaned forward slightly. We're losing good people to algorithmic screening. We're missing talent because our systems can't recognize character, resilience, the exact qualities that make someone valuable in crisis situations. I want to change that, but I need someone who understands the problem from both sides. What are you suggesting? I'm creating a new position, Director of Talent Recovery. The role would involve identifying qualified candidates who've been systematically excluded by our current hiring practices, developing programs to bring them back into the workforce, and fundamentally rethinking how we evaluate human potential. Hale's pale blue eyes fixed on Caleb. I want you to build it. The words took a moment to register. Caleb set his coffee cup down carefully. Mr. Hale, I appreciate the confidence, but I just started as an engineer. I don't have HR experience, management background. You have something more valuable. You've lived the problem. You know what it's like to be capable and desperate, qualified and invisible. That perspective is irreplaceable. Hale stood, moving to the windows. I'm not asking you to abandon engineering. This would be a hybrid role. You'd continue working with David's team while developing the talent recovery program. Additional compensation, of course. $130,000 base salary with performance bonuses tied to successful placements. Caleb's mind reeled. A month ago, he'd been selling his wedding ring for grocery money. Now he was being offered nearly 6 figures to redesign how a $4 billion company thought about hiring. Why me? You could hire someone with actual HR expertise. HR expertise created the problem. I need someone who understands it from the other side. Hale turned back to face him. 4 weeks ago, you stood in a pawn shop and chose dignity over desperation. You didn't beg, didn't manipulate, didn't try to extract sympathy. You simply accepted an unfair situation and moved forward. That's the kind of character I want shaping how we identify and develop talent. Caleb thought about all the rejection emails, the applications that disappeared into automated systems, the slow erosion of hope that came from being invisible to algorithms that couldn't see past numbers on a resume. He thought about other people like him, qualified, capable, drowning in circumstances that had nothing to do with their ability to contribute. If I did this, Caleb said slowly, I'd want to do it right. Not just hiring people out of sympathy, but genuinely finding overlooked talent and giving them real opportunities. That's exactly what I'm asking for. And I'd need authority to challenge existing processes, to push back on executives who think the current system works fine. Hale smiled slightly. You'll have my full support, which means you'll have all the authority you need. Caleb looked out the windows at the city below, at the thousands of people moving through their days, some thriving, some struggling, most invisible to the companies that could change their trajectories with a single yes. I'll do it, he said. But I need 3 months to prove myself in engineering first, to establish credibility so people take the talent recovery program seriously. Fair enough. 3 months. Hale extended his hand. Welcome to the executive team, Mr. Wright. The handshake felt surreal. Caleb left the office 20 minutes later with a new contract, a new title, and the distinct feeling that his life had accelerated beyond his ability to process it. Jennifer was waiting by his desk when he returned to the aerospace floor, arms crossed, expression somewhere between amused and curious. So, what did the Emperor want? Caleb sat down, still processing. He offered me a promotion. You've been here a month. I know. Doing what? Caleb explained the talent recovery program, watching Jennifer's expression shift from skepticism to interest. Actually, she said when he finished, that's not terrible. I know 3 engineers who left the field because of family situations and couldn't get hired back. The gap thing is real. You think people will take it seriously? If Hale's backing it? Yeah. He doesn't do vanity projects. Jennifer leaned against his desk. Fair warning, though, corporate will hate this, HR especially. You'll be implying their systems are broken. Their systems are broken. True. But people don't like being told that, especially by someone who's been here a month. She grinned. This should be entertaining to watch. Over the next 3 months, Caleb split his time between aerospace engineering and building the framework for what he was starting to call the Second Chance Initiative. The engineering work grounded him, kept him connected to the technical reality of what Hale Industries actually did. The talent recovery work challenged him in completely different ways, studying employment data, interviewing HR managers who viewed him with suspicion, identifying patterns in who got hired and who got filtered out. The patterns were brutal. Anyone with an employment gap over 6 months got automatically rejected, regardless of reason. Anyone who'd worked in a declining industry got deprioritized. Anyone over 45 faced algorithmic bias disguised as objective screening. The system was designed to find safe bets, which meant it systematically excluded anyone who'd experienced hardship, career disruption, or bad timing. Caleb built a presentation documenting everything he'd found and scheduled a meeting with the executive leadership team for early February. The night before, he stayed late at the office, reviewing his data one more time, making sure every conclusion was defensible. You're going to get destroyed tomorrow. Caleb looked up. Marcus Hall stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. That optimistic, huh? Marcus handed him one of the cups and pulled up a chair. I've been here 15 years. Seen a lot of initiatives come and go. The ones that threaten existing power structures? They don't go quietly. Should I be worried? Probably. Marcus sipped his coffee. But you should do it anyway. I had a cousin, brilliant mechanical engineer, worked for Boeing for 12 years, got laid off during a merger, spent 8 months taking care of his dying mother. By the time he was ready to work again, no one would touch him. Gap was too long. He's driving for Uber now. Caleb knew that story. Had lived a version of it. What would have helped him? Someone willing to look past the gap, to see the person instead of the algorithm's assessment. Marcus stood. That's what you're building, right? So yeah, you'll get destroyed tomorrow. But you'll also be right. Sometimes that matters. The executive meeting started at 9. Caleb arrived 15 minutes early to set up his presentation in the top floor conference room, a space even more intimidating than Hale's office. All glass and steel and views that made you feel like you were floating above the city. The executives arrived in clusters. David Chen, who nodded encouragingly. Patricia Morrison, CFO, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Robert Kellerman, head of HR, whose expression suggested he already knew he wasn't going to like what came next. 5 other division heads, all successful, all comfortable, all accustomed to systems that worked in their favor. Richard Hale entered last, taking a seat at the head of the table without ceremony. Let's begin. Caleb, the floor is yours. Caleb stood, clicked to his first slide, and dove in. He presented the data dispassionately, rejection rates, demographic patterns, the systematic exclusion of qualified candidates based on circumstances rather than capability. He showed them the false negatives, people the algorithm had rejected who went on to excel at competitors. He walked them through the cost analysis, demonstrating how much talent the company was leaving on the table. Patricia Morrison interrupted halfway through. These numbers assume that people with employment gaps perform at the same level as traditional hires. Do we have evidence for that? We don't, because we don't hire them, Caleb said. That's circular logic. We assume they're risky, so we don't hire them, so we have no data, so we continue assuming they're risky. Or, Robert Kellerman said, his voice tight with barely concealed irritation, we could recognize that employment gaps correlate with performance issues, and our algorithms are simply identifying that pattern. Do they? Or do they correlate with circumstances beyond people's control? Caleb clicked to his next slide. Medical crises, family caregiving, economic downturns, industry collapses. Show me the data proving that someone who took 6 months off to care for a dying parent is a worse engineer than someone who didn't face that situation. The data shows that continuous employment correlates with better performance. Well, the data shows that people who've never experienced hardship tend to have more opportunities. That's not the same thing. Caleb kept his voice level. We're confusing privilege with competence." The room went silent. Patricia Morrison's expression hardened. Two of the division heads exchanged glances. Only David Chen looked satisfied. Hale spoke for the first time. "Continue, Caleb." Caleb walked them through his proposal. A separate hiring track for high-potential candidates with non-traditional backgrounds. Modified interview processes focused on problem-solving and technical skills rather than resume gaps. Paid training programs to update skills. Mentorship from senior engineers. Success metrics tied to performance, not pedigree. The cost for a pilot program is approximately $2 million over 18 months, Caleb concluded. If successful, we could scale it across all divisions. The ROI is potentially significant. We'd be accessing a talent pool our competitors ignore. Patricia Morrison spoke first. $2 million is a substantial investment for an unproven concept. We spend more than that on recruiting fees to headhunters every quarter, David Chen countered. This is actually cheaper than our current approach. Our current approach has a proven track record. Our current approach leaves qualified people unemployed while we complain about talent shortages, Chen said flatly. I've reviewed Caleb's analysis. It's sound. Robert Kellerman leaned forward. With respect, David, you're not an HR professional. These systems exist for a reason. They filter out risk. They filter out people, Caleb said quietly. And sometimes the people they filter out are exactly who you need. Kellerman's jaw tightened. This is idealistic nonsense. We're a business, not a charity. Our responsibility is to shareholders, not to everyone who's had a hard time. Our responsibility is to build the best possible company, Hale said, his voice cutting through the tension, which requires the best possible people. If our current systems can't identify them, then our systems are failing. The room shifted. Several executives sat back, recognizing the signal. When Richard Hale stated a position that clearly the debate was effectively over. I want to pilot this program, Hale continued. Caleb will run it. David's division will be the test case. If it succeeds, we expand. If it fails, we reevaluate. But we're doing this. He looked directly at Kellerman. Robert, I'll need your team's full cooperation. Kellerman's smile was tight. Of course. The meeting ended 15 minutes later. Caleb packed up his materials, aware that he'd just made enemies in HR and finance. David Chen caught his arm as he headed for the door. Well done. You didn't back down. I probably should have been more diplomatic. Diplomacy is overrated. You were right, and you had data to prove it. That matters more. Chen smiled. Also, Kellerman's an ass. Don't worry about him. Over the next 2 months, Caleb built the pilot program from the ground up. He reviewed hundreds of applications from people who'd been systematically rejected, cancer survivors, military veterans with PTSD, former engineers who'd left the field to raise children, workers displaced by industry consolidation. Each file told a story the algorithms had reduced to a binary judgment, not suitable. Caleb looked for something different. Not perfect resumes, but evidence of resilience, problem-solving, the ability to adapt under pressure. He found a former aerospace engineer who'd spent 3 years as a caregiver for her mother with Alzheimer's, a software developer who'd taken 5 years off for missionary work in Africa, a mechanical engineer who'd lost his job in the 2008 financial crisis and spent a decade doing contract work to stay afloat. The interviews were different too. Caleb didn't ask about gaps. He presented technical problems and watched how people thought through them. He asked about challenges they'd overcome, what they'd learned from failure, how they adapted when circumstances changed. By March, he'd identified 12 candidates for the pilot program. David Chen interviewed each one personally, then signed off on all 12. These are good people, Chen said after the last interview. Better than half the traditional hires we've made this year. If they perform, Kellerman's going to have a hard time arguing against expansion. The 12 started in April, a mix of engineers, project managers, and technical specialists, each with employment gaps ranging from 6 months to 5 years. Caleb assigned each one a mentor from the senior engineering staff and checked in weekly to track progress and address problems. Most of them struggled initially. Skills had atrophied, technology had evolved, confidence was shaky, but they also brought something the traditional hires didn't, a bone-deep understanding that this was a second chance they couldn't afford to waste. They worked harder, stayed later, asked more questions, absorbed feedback like they were dying of thirst. Within 2 months, 3 of them had been promoted. Within 4 months, one had solved a critical design problem that had stumped the regular engineering team for weeks. By June, David Chen was requesting permission to hire 8 more through the program. Richard Hale called Caleb to his office on a Friday afternoon in late June. "The board met yesterday," Hale said without preamble. "I presented the results from the Second Chance initiative. They approved full expansion across all divisions, with a budget of $20 million over 3 years. Caleb sat down slowly. $20 million. Your pilot program has a 92% retention rate and performance scores 15% above our traditional hiring average. That's not just good, it's exceptional." Hale's expression was as close to pleased as Caleb had ever seen it. "You've proven that character and capability matter more than perfect resumes. The board wants to scale this company wide." "I'll need a team. This is too much for one person." "You'll have whatever resources you need. I'm also promoting you to Vice President of Talent Development, reporting directly to me. Salary adjusted to $180,000. The number hung in the air between them. 6 months ago, Caleb had been selling his wedding ring for $45. Now he was a vice president making nearly $200,000 a year. "Mr. Hale, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing. Say you'll remember what it felt like to be on the other side of these systems. Say you won't let success make you forget." Hale stood, moving to the windows. "I've watched a lot of people rise through this company. Most of them develop amnesia about where they came from. They start to believe they succeeded purely through merit, that everyone who struggles simply isn't working hard enough. Don't become that person." "I won't." "Good. Because this company needs people who remember what it's like to fight for every inch, who understand that talent doesn't always come wrapped in perfect credentials." Hale turned back to face him. "You're building something important here, Caleb. Don't lose sight of that." That evening, Caleb drove to the apartment complex where he and Emma had moved in February, a 2-bedroom unit with working heat, a dishwasher, and a view of a small park where Emma played after school. The place still felt too nice, too stable, like he might wake up and find out it had all been an elaborate dream. Emma was in the living room working on an art project, her school book spread across the coffee table. She looked up when Caleb entered, her smile bright and healthy. No cough, no struggling for breath, just a normal 7-year-old thriving in an environment that didn't make her sick. "Daddy, look what I made at school!" She held up a drawing of their family. Her, Caleb, and a stick figure with angel wings labeled "Mommy Watching." Caleb's throat tightened. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." "Mrs. Richardson said we should draw our families. I wasn't sure if I should put Mommy in, but then I remembered you said she's always with us." Caleb sat down next to her, pulling her close. "She is. Always." Emma leaned against him. "Are you happy, Daddy?" The question caught him off guard. "Yeah, baby, I'm happy. Are you?" "Really happy. I like our new apartment, and I like that you're not worried all the time anymore." Emma looked up at him. "You used to look scared, even when you smiled, but now you look like the scared part went away." Caleb hadn't realized how much his daughter had been reading his fear, carrying it alongside her own worries. "The scared part did go away, because things are better now." "Because of your job?" "Because of a lot of things. But yeah, the job helps." Emma was quiet for a moment. "The man who gave you the job, Mr. Hale. He's a good person, right?" "Yes, a very good person." "Then we should do something nice for him, to say thank you." Caleb smiled. "What did you have in mind?" Emma thought about it seriously. "Maybe we could make him cookies or draw him a picture, something that shows we're grateful." The innocence of it, thinking cookies could somehow repay someone who'd fundamentally altered their lives, made Caleb's chest ache. But Emma was right in the way children often are. Gratitude mattered, even when it couldn't match the scale of the gift. "I think that's a great idea," Caleb said. "We'll make him something special." The next Saturday, Caleb and Emma spent the morning baking chocolate chip cookies, Sarah's recipe, the one she'd made for every special occasion. Emma measured ingredients with serious concentration while Caleb managed the oven, and together they produced 4 dozen cookies that actually looked and smelled legitimate. Emma also drew a picture, more sophisticated than the stick figures from school, showing a man in a suit helping another man stand up with a little girl watching. She labeled it Mr. Hale helping Daddy help me. Monday morning, Caleb brought both gifts to Richard Hale's office. The receptionist raised an eyebrow at the Tupperware container and hand-drawn picture, but buzzed him through. Hale looked up from his desk, surprised. "Caleb, I wasn't expecting you." "I'm sorry to interrupt. My daughter wanted to thank you properly. We made these." Caleb set the cookies and drawing on Hale's desk. Hale picked up the drawing, studying it carefully. His expression softened in a way Caleb had never seen before. "This is from Emma?" "She insisted. Said we needed to do something nice for the person who helped us." Hale was quiet for a long moment, still looking at the drawing. "I haven't received anything this thoughtful in years. Thank you. Tell Emma I'm honored." "I will." Caleb hesitated. "Mr. Hale, I wanted you to know that what you did, stopping in that pawn shop, asking about my situation, giving me a chance when you had no reason to, it didn't just change my life. It changed my daughter's life. It changed everything. You changed your own life, Caleb. I simply removed an obstacle. You removed the obstacle that mattered most. Hope. I'd lost it, completely. And then you showed me it was still possible to build something better." Caleb's voice roughened slightly. "I'll spend the rest of my career trying to do for others what you did for me." Hale set the drawing down carefully. "Then my intervention was worthwhile. Not because it helped one person, but because it created someone who'll help hundreds." He met Caleb's eyes directly. "That's how real change happens. Not through grand gestures, but through one person deciding to extend the same grace they received." Caleb left the office 15 minutes later, riding the elevator back down to the engineering floors, where his new team was already working on scaling the Second Chance initiative nationwide. The weight on his shoulders felt different now, not the crushing pressure of survival, but the purposeful weight of responsibility freely chosen. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Did he like the cookies?" Caleb smiled and typed back. "He loved them. Said to tell you thank you." 3 dots appeared, then, "Good. You're doing important work, Daddy. I'm proud of you. 7 years old and already wiser than most adults." Caleb pocketed his phone and went back to work, building systems designed to recognize what algorithms missed. That character, resilience, and human potential couldn't be reduced to numbers on a screen, and that sometimes the best people were the ones who'd been knocked down and chose to stand back up. The Second Chance initiative expanded faster than Caleb had anticipated. By September, 8 months after the pilot program launched, Hale Industries had hired 73 people through the new system across all 6 divisions. The retention rate held steady at 90%, and performance metrics consistently exceeded traditional hiring benchmarks. What had started as a personal mission was becoming institutional practice, embedded in how the company thought about talent. But success at scale brought complications Caleb hadn't fully prepared for. Robert Kellerman appeared at Caleb's office door on a Tuesday morning in late September, his expression professionally neutral in a way that immediately set off warning bells. "Caleb, do you have a minute?" Caleb looked up from the application he'd been reviewing, a former project manager who'd spent 2 years caring for a special needs child and was now trying to re-enter the workforce. "Sure, come in." Kellerman closed the door behind him and sat down without invitation. "I wanted to discuss some concerns about the Second Chance initiative." "I'm listening." "The program is growing rapidly. 73 hires in 8 months, with another 45 in the pipeline. That's significant expansion for an experimental program." Kellerman's tone was measured, reasonable. "My team is concerned about quality control. The performance data speaks for itself. Second Chance hires are outperforming traditional candidates. In the short term, perhaps. But we don't have long-term data yet. We don't know how these employees will perform under sustained pressure during economic downturns when the novelty wears off." Kellerman leaned forward slightly. "My job is to protect this company from risk. And right now, we're taking on a lot of risk very quickly." Caleb set down the application. "These are qualified people who were systematically excluded. We're not lowering standards, we're correcting for algorithmic bias. You're correcting for what you perceive as bias, but those algorithms were designed by experts based on decades of employment data. They're not perfect, but they're not arbitrary either. Kellerman's voice hardened slightly. You've been here less than a year, Caleb. You've done impressive work, no question. But you're treating established HR practices like they're fundamentally broken based on your personal experience. That's not objective analysis. That's confirmation bias. The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. Caleb's drive to fix the system was absolutely rooted in his own experience of being failed by it. But that didn't make him wrong. My personal experience taught me to look for what the data misses, Caleb said carefully. Character, resilience, the ability to perform under circumstances that would break most people. Those qualities don't show up on resumes, but they matter enormously when challenges hit. Or they create employees with loyalty issues, chip-on-shoulder attitudes, and resentment toward traditional success paths. Kellerman stood. I'm not trying to undermine your program. I'm trying to ensure we're making sound business decisions, not social justice statements. There's a difference. After Kellerman left, Caleb sat staring at the closed door, frustration simmering in his chest. The conversation had been professional, civil even, but the underlying message was clear. You're moving too fast, you're threatening the established order. Slow down, or there will be consequences. Jennifer appeared in his doorway an hour later, somehow sensing the tension. Kellerman stopped by. How did you know? Because he's been making rounds to all the division heads, expressing concerns about the Second Chance initiative. Jennifer made air quotes around the word. He's building a case against expansion. Based on what? The data's solid. Based on the fact that your program threatens everything he's built his career on. Kellerman's whole value proposition is running efficient, low-risk HR operations. Your program says his approach systematically fails. That makes him look bad. Jennifer sat down. This isn't about data, Caleb. This is about power and ego. So what do I do? Document everything. Make sure your metrics are bulletproof. And keep Richard Hale in your corner, because if Kellerman convinces the board that you're a liability, even good performance won't save you. The warning proved prescient. 2 weeks later, Caleb received an email requesting his presence at an emergency board meeting. The subject line read, Second Chance Initiative Review. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. Caleb spent the weekend preparing, running every number 3 times, anticipating every possible objection. Emma noticed his tension, asking twice if everything was okay. Caleb told her it was just work stress, nothing to worry about, while privately wondering if he was about to watch his program, and possibly his career, get dismantled by corporate politics. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, early October weather that matched Caleb's mood. He dressed carefully in his best suit, still not as expensive as what the other executives wore, but respectable, and arrived at Hale Industries 45 minutes early. The boardroom was on the top floor adjacent to Richard Hale's office. Caleb had never been inside before. The space was designed to intimidate. Massive table of polished wood, leather chairs that probably cost more than his first car, walls lined with portraits of the company's history. 12 board members would be present, plus Richard Hale, Robert Kellerman, and Patricia Morrison. Caleb was setting up his presentation when Hale entered. Nervous? Hale's tone was neutral, assessing. Should I be? Probably. Kellerman's been campaigning against your program for weeks. He's convinced several board members that you're exposing the company to unacceptable risk. Hale poured himself coffee from the service near the windows. He's not entirely wrong, you know. Any new initiative carries risk. The question is whether the risk is justified by the potential reward. You think it is. I know it is. I've seen the results. But I'm one vote on a 12-person board, and several members are predisposed to favor conservative approaches. Hale turned to face him. You're going to have to fight for this, Caleb, not with emotion, but with irrefutable logic. Can you do that? I can try. Good. Because if you can't defend this program today, it's over. The board will kill it, regardless of how I vote. The board members began arriving at 9:50. Caleb recognized a few from photos on the company website. Successful executives and investors, people accustomed to making high-stakes decisions based on data and risk assessment. They took their seats with the casual confidence of those who'd spent decades in positions of power. Robert Kellerman arrived last, carrying a leather portfolio, and wearing an expression of polite concern. He nodded to Caleb with professional courtesy, the kind that meant absolutely nothing. Richard Hale called the meeting to order at 10 precisely. Thank you all for making time on short notice. We're here to review the Second Chance Initiative, a talent acquisition program launched 9 months ago. Caleb Wright, the program's architect and current VP of Talent Development, will present current results and projections. Following that, we'll hear concerns from HR and finance, then open discussion. Hale looked at Caleb. Whenever you're ready. Caleb stood, clicked to his first slide, and began. He walked them through the data dispassionately. 73 hires across 6 divisions. 90% retention rate versus 82% for traditional hires. Performance scores averaging 15% higher. Cost per hire 40% lower due to reduced recruiting fees. Employee satisfaction scores 23% higher among second chance hires. 3 promotions already, with 2 more pending. The program is succeeding by every measurable metric, Caleb concluded. We're accessing overlooked talent, improving performance, reducing costs, and increasing retention. The business case is clear. A woman Caleb recognized as Sarah Chen, board member and former Fortune 500 CEO, spoke first. These are impressive short-term results, but Mr. Kellerman has raised concerns about long-term viability. Can you address those? Of course. What specific concerns? Kellerman activated his own presentation on the secondary screen. Thank you, Sarah. My concerns center on 3 areas. First, sustainability. Second chance hires are performing well now, but we don't know if that performance will hold over time. Second, scalability. The program requires significant manual intervention, individual interviews, customized onboarding, ongoing mentorship. That approach doesn't scale efficiently. Third, risk management. We're hiring people with documented employment gaps, which historically correlate with higher turnover and performance issues. He clicked through slides showing industry data about employment gaps, retention challenges, the costs of bad hires. The presentation was professional, data-driven, and deeply misleading in ways that made Caleb's teeth clench. Mr. Kellerman is cherry-picking data, Caleb said when Kellerman finished. He's showing industry averages for all workers with employment gaps, not comparing equivalent talent pools. Our second chance hires aren't random unemployed people. They're pre-screened candidates with demonstrated expertise and strong references. The comparison is invalid. The data shows patterns, Kellerman countered smoothly. Employment gaps correlate with risk. That's not opinion. It's statistical fact. Employment gaps correlate with circumstances, Caleb shot back. Medical crises, caregiving responsibilities, industry downturns, military service, none of those things indicate poor performance. They indicate life happened. A man at the far end of the table, Thomas Bradford, Caleb remembered, a private equity investor, spoke up. With respect, Mr. Wright, business decisions can't be made based on sympathy for difficult circumstances. We have fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for accurate risk assessment. Caleb pulled up a new slide. Here's our actual data. 0 terminations for performance issues among second chance hires. 3 voluntary departures, all for personal reasons unrelated to job performance. Compare that to traditional hires over the same period. 8 terminations, 12 departures. Our program has lower risk, not higher. Patricia Morrison leaned forward. Current data is encouraging, but the sample size is still small. 73 hires isn't statistically significant for predicting long-term trends. Agreed, which is why I'm proposing controlled expansion rather than unlimited scaling. Add another 100 hires over the next year, continue tracking metrics, build a larger data set. Caleb met her gaze directly. But don't kill a successful program because you're afraid of what might happen when the evidence suggests it's working exactly as designed. The evidence suggests short-term success, Kellerman interjected. We won't know if this is sustainable until we see performance through economic cycles, organizational changes, competitive pressures. By that logic, we should never try anything new, David Chen said from his seat along the wall where division heads were observing. Every innovation carries risk. The question is whether the risk is managed appropriately. And I'm suggesting it's not, Kellerman said. The program lacks proper oversight, moves too quickly, makes decisions based on subjective assessments rather than objective criteria. Caleb felt his temper flare. Subjective assessments like character and problem-solving ability, those aren't objective? Not in the way algorithmic screening is objective. Your algorithms rejected me 3 times, Caleb said, his voice harder than he intended. They saw an employment gap and filtered me out, despite 8 years of excellent performance at Morrison Dynamics. They couldn't account for a dying wife, a young daughter, impossible circumstances. They just saw risk and moved on. That's not objectivity. That's mechanical bias dressed up as data science. The room went silent. Caleb realized he'd just made it personal, exactly what he'd promised himself he wouldn't do. Sarah Chen broke the silence. Mr. Wright, I appreciate your passion, but I'm concerned about Mr. Kellerman's point regarding scalability. This program requires extensive manual intervention. How do you scale that efficiently? Caleb took a breath, forcing himself back to logic. By building infrastructure. We've developed an interview protocol that can be taught to hiring managers. We've created mentorship frameworks that standardize onboarding. We've identified key performance indicators that flag struggling employees early. Yes, it's more hands-on than algorithmic screening, but it's also more effective, which justifies the investment. At what cost? Patricia Morrison asked. What's the total program budget? Current annual operating cost is approximately $3.2 million, including my salary and support staff. That's against savings of roughly $5.8 million in reduced recruiting fees and improved retention. Net positive of $2.6 million. Morrison made a note. And projected costs for expansion? Scale to 200 hires annually. Costs rise to approximately $6 million. But savings scale proportionally. We'd be looking at net positive of $5 to $6 million annually once the program stabilizes. Thomas Bradford frowned. Those projections assume sustained performance at current levels. If performance regresses to industry norms, your savings evaporate and we're left with higher operational costs. If performance regresses, we adjust. But right now, we're killing a profitable program because we're afraid it might stop being profitable eventually. That's not sound risk management. That's risk aversion disguised as prudence. The discussion continued for another hour. Board members raised questions about specific metrics, challenged assumptions, debated risk models. Caleb answered each concern as factually as possible, avoiding emotion, sticking to data. But he could feel the room's energy, and it wasn't in his favor. Finally, Richard Hale spoke. I think we've heard enough to make an informed decision. I'm calling for a vote. The question before the board: do we continue the Second Chance initiative with controlled expansion, as Mr. Wright has proposed, or do we sunset the program and return to traditional hiring practices? The vote was by show of hands. Caleb watched, counting silently. 5 hands went up for continuation, 7 against. The program was dead. Hale's expression didn't change. The board has spoken. The Second Chance initiative will be phased out over the next 6 months. Current hires will be retained, but no new candidates will be processed through the program. He looked at Caleb. Thank you for your presentation and your work on this initiative. I know this isn't the outcome you hoped for. Caleb nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The board members began gathering their materials, conversations resuming in low tones. Kellerman caught his eye across the table and nodded with professional sympathy that felt like a knife between the ribs. David Chen intercepted Caleb in the hallway outside the boardroom. That was brutal. I'm sorry. I lost. You fought well. The data was solid. They just weren't ready to take the leap. Chen gripped his shoulder. For what it's worth, the engineering division is keeping every second chance hire we've made. Those people have proven themselves. That matters. It did matter, Caleb knew. 73 people had jobs they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. That was real, significant, but it felt like a fraction of what could have been, what should have been. He returned to his office and closed the door, sitting in silence for 10 minutes before his phone rang. Richard Hale. Come to my office, please. Hale was standing by the windows when Caleb arrived, looking out at the city with an expression Caleb couldn't read. I'm sorry, Hale said without preamble. I knew the vote would be close, but I thought we had 6 solid supporters. Thomas Bradford changed his mind at the last moment. It's not your fault. It's my board. I should have done more to build consensus before the meeting. Hale turned to face him. You did everything right, Caleb. Your presentation was excellent. Your data was sound. You handled hostile questions professionally. You lost because the board is risk-averse and Kellerman is politically skilled. That's not a reflection on you or the program. It still failed. In its current form, yes, but you've proven the concept works. You've created a template that other companies can adopt. You've changed how we think about talent, even if the board wasn't ready to commit fully. Hale moved to his desk. I want you to know that your position here is secure. VP of Talent Development remains a critical role, even without the Second Chance initiative. You'll continue working with David's division and other departments on standard recruitment and development. Caleb appreciated the reassurance, but it felt hollow. I'm not sure I can go back to standard practices after this. Then don't. Take some time. Think about what you want to build next. The initiative failed, but you didn't. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Caleb left the office feeling like he'd been hollowed out. He'd poured 9 months into building something that mattered, something that gave people like him a second chance at careers they deserved. And it had died in a boardroom vote because people in power were more afraid of theoretical risk than motivated by proven results. Emma sensed his mood the moment he walked into their apartment that evening. Bad day. Caleb set his briefcase down. Yeah, sweetheart. Bad day. Want to talk about it? He looked at his 7-year-old daughter who'd learned too early to read emotional weather, to offer comfort beyond her years. The program I was building at work, the one that helps people get jobs, the company decided not to continue it. Emma's face fell. But it was working. You said people were doing really well. They are, but sometimes that's not enough. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. Caleb pulled her into a hug. But that's how things go sometimes. You do good work, and it still doesn't turn out the way you hoped. Emma was quiet for a moment. Are you going to stop trying? The question cut through his self-pity like a blade. What do you mean? Are you going to stop helping people find jobs because this didn't work? Caleb thought about the 73 people who had jobs because he'd fought for them. Thought about the hundreds more who could have been helped if the program had survived. Thought about what giving up would mean. No, he said quietly. I'm not going to stop trying. Good. Because Mommy wouldn't have stopped. She always said if something's worth doing, you keep doing it even when it's hard. Sarah had said that, Caleb remembered. During her treatment, when the odds were impossible and everyone knew how it would end, she'd kept fighting anyway, not because she thought she'd win, but because giving up wasn't who she was. You're right, Caleb said. Mommy wouldn't have stopped, so neither will I. Over the next week, Caleb began receiving calls and emails from unexpected sources. An HR director at an aerospace competitor who'd heard about the Second Chance initiative and wanted to implement something similar. A nonprofit focused on workforce development that was interested in partnering. A reporter from a business magazine who wanted to write about innovative hiring practices. The program had failed at Hale Industries, but the idea was spreading anyway. Jennifer stopped by his office on Friday afternoon with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. I figured you could use this. Caleb accepted the glass. It's 3 in the afternoon. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Besides, you just got your program killed by people who wouldn't recognize innovation if it bit them. That deserves a drink. They toasted silently and drank. The bourbon burned, going down. I got a call yesterday, Jennifer said after a moment. From Tech Venture Partners. They're launching a new aerospace startup and asked if I'd be interested in joining as chief engineer. Caleb looked at her sharply. Are you leaving? I'm thinking about it. The startup's risky, but the work is interesting and they're offering equity. Jennifer swirled her bourbon. But that's not why I'm telling you. They also asked if I knew anyone good for VP of Talent. Someone who could build a hiring system from scratch for a new company. I gave them your name. Jennifer, hear me out. You've proven you can identify and develop overlooked talent. You've got data showing your approach works. A startup would give you complete freedom to build the system right from the beginning without fighting entrenched bureaucracy. She met his eyes. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is having your safety net cut. Forces you to jump higher. I have a daughter to support. Jumping to a startup is risky. So was selling your wedding ring to keep the lights on. You've done risky before. Jennifer finished her bourbon. Just think about it. The opportunity's there if you want it. After she left, Caleb sat alone in his office, turning the empty glass in his hands. A startup meant uncertainty, potential failure, giving up the security he'd fought so hard to achieve. But it also meant freedom to build something without compromise, without board votes and political maneuvering. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mrs. Richardson says I'm the best reader in class. She says I should be proud of myself. Are you proud of me? Caleb smiled and typed back. Incredibly proud. You're amazing. 3 dots appeared, then, you're amazing too, Daddy, even when things are hard. That night, Caleb pulled out the business card Jennifer had left on his desk. Tech Venture Partners, a number for someone named Michael Torres, managing partner. He stared at it for a long time, thinking about safety versus possibility, security versus purpose, the comfortable path versus the meaningful one. Then he picked up his phone and started composing an email. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is having your safety net cut. Sometimes you have to jump higher. Caleb stared at the email draft on his phone for 3 full minutes before deleting it and starting over. The first version had been too cautious, hedging his interest with qualifications about stability and family responsibilities. The second was too eager, making him sound desperate. The third, the one he finally sent at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, was honest. Mr. Torres, Jennifer Reeves suggested I contact you regarding the VP of Talent position at your new venture. I'm currently VP of Talent Development at Hale Industries, where I built a successful alternative hiring program that was recently discontinued due to board concerns about scalability. I believe the program's failure says more about corporate risk aversion than about the model's viability. If you're interested in someone who can build innovative talent systems from the ground up, I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss your vision. Best regards, Caleb Wright. The response came Sunday afternoon while Caleb was helping Emma build a blanket fort in the living room. Caleb, I've heard good things about your work from Jennifer and others. Free for coffee Tuesday morning? MT. They met at a cafe near the waterfront, one of those places that catered to early morning business meetings with strong coffee and private corners. Michael Torres was younger than Caleb expected, maybe 40, with the lean energy of someone who'd built and sold multiple companies. He shook hands firmly and ordered 2 espressos without asking if Caleb wanted one. Jennifer speaks highly of you, Torres said once they were seated. Said you built something remarkable at Hale and got screwed by politics. That's one way to describe it. Tell me another way. Caleb walked him through the Second Chance initiative, the data, the results, the board vote that killed it. Torres listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a tablet. So you proved the concept works, changed minds at the division level, and still lost the institutional fight, Torres said when Caleb finished. That must have been frustrating. It was educational. I learned that being right isn't enough if you can't navigate power dynamics. True. But you also learned how to build something from scratch, measure results, and defend your work under hostile scrutiny. Those are valuable skills. Torres leaned forward. Here's what I'm building. Tech Venture Partners is launching Apex Dynamics, next-generation aerospace systems for commercial and defense applications. We've got $12 million in seed funding, partnerships with 2 major defense contractors, and a mandate to move fast. Jennifer's joining as chief engineer. I need someone to build the entire talent infrastructure. From zero? Completely from zero. No legacy systems, no entrenched bureaucracy, no HR department telling you what's possible. Just a blank slate and a mission to hire the best people we can find, however we need to find them. Torres's eyes were bright with the particular intensity of someone chasing a vision. I want you to implement your second chance concept from day one. Make it foundational to how we hire, not a special program we tack on later. Can you do that? Caleb felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd wanted to build at Hale before corporate politics got in the way, a company designed around recognizing human potential rather than filtering it through algorithmic bias. What's the catch? Torres smiled. The catch is that startups fail. 70% of them don't make it past 5 years. The catch is that your salary would be 120 base plus equity, which is less than you're making now, and the equity might end up worthless. The catch is that you'd be betting your career on an unproven company in a brutally competitive industry. And if it works, you'll have built exactly the kind of talent system you envisioned at a company that could reshape the aerospace industry, and your equity could be worth millions. Torres set his tablet aside. But I'm not selling you on lottery ticket dreams. I'm offering you the chance to build something meaningful with people who share your values. Whether that's worth the risk is your call. Caleb thought about Emma, about the stability they'd finally achieved, about the apartment with working heat and the medical bills he could actually pay. Leaving Hale meant gambling that stability on an uncertain future, but it also meant building something that mattered, the way he'd always intended before the board vote stripped away the possibility. I need to think about it, Caleb said. Talk to my daughter, make sure I'm not being reckless. Fair enough. I need an answer by next Friday. Jennifer's already committed, and I'm talking to 3 other senior engineers this week. If you're in, I want to move fast. That evening, Caleb sat Emma down for a serious conversation. She listened with the grave attention she brought to important matters, her small face serious. So you might leave your job and go to a new company? Emma asked when he finished explaining. Maybe. It's risky. The new company might not succeed. But you'd be helping people again, like you wanted to. Yes. Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking it through with 7-year-old logic that often cut straight to the truth. Daddy, are you happy at your job now? The question surprised him. I'm grateful for it. It gave us everything we needed. That's not what I asked. Caleb looked at his daughter, at the intelligence in her eyes that reminded him so much of Sarah. No, sweetheart, I'm not happy. I'm doing good work, but it's not the work I wanted to do. Then you should do the work you want to do. Mommy always said life's too short to spend it doing things that don't matter. This is a big decision, Emma. It affects both of us. I know, but we've been scared before and we got through it. We can be brave again if we need to. She climbed into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. I trust you, Daddy. Whatever you decide is okay. The faith in her voice broke something open in Caleb's chest. His daughter, who'd lived through poverty and fear and uncertainty, was telling him it was okay to take a risk for something meaningful. She was braver than he was. Monday morning, Caleb requested a meeting with Richard Hale. Hale's assistant scheduled him for 3 p.m. Caleb spent the intervening hours working on standard recruitment tasks, his mind only half engaged, already composing the resignation speech he'd need to deliver. At 3 precisely, he rode the elevator to the top floor. Hale looked up as Caleb entered, his pale blue eyes sharp. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. How did you know? You have that look. People get it when they've decided to jump without a net. Hale gestured to the seating area. Tell me about the offer. Caleb explained Tech Venture Partners, Apex Dynamics, the opportunity to build a talent system from scratch. Hale listened without interruption. It's a good opportunity, Hale said when Caleb finished. Risky, but good. Michael Torres is smart, aggressive, well-connected. If anyone can make an aerospace startup work in this market, it's him. He paused. I could counteroffer. Give you more authority here, guaranteed budget for a modified second chance program, direct board access. Could you get the board to reverse their vote? No, they've made their position clear. Then a counteroffer doesn't solve the fundamental problem. I can't build what I need to build within the constraints this company requires. Caleb met Hale's gaze directly. I'm grateful for everything you've done. You changed my life, gave me back my career when I'd lost all hope. But I need to do this. Hale was quiet for a long moment, studying Caleb with an expression that might have been approval. When I intervened in that pawn shop, I saw someone who refused to be diminished by circumstances, someone who maintained dignity when the world was grinding him down. I gave you an opportunity because I recognized that quality. He stood, moving to the windows. Now I'm watching you choose principle over security, purpose over comfort. That same quality, matured and refined. I'm proud of you, Caleb. The words hit harder than Caleb expected. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Just build something worthy of the leap you're taking. Hale turned back. And when you need partnerships, contacts, advice, call me. Success isn't zero-sum. Your achievements don't diminish mine. They validate the bet I made on you. Caleb extended his hand. I won't let you down. You couldn't possibly. You've already proven everything I hoped you would. Hale's grip was firm, final. Now go prove it to yourself. Caleb submitted his formal resignation the next morning, standard 2 weeks' notice, professional and courteous. David Chen took the news harder than expected, pulling Caleb into his office with an expression of genuine disappointment. You're making a mistake, Chen said bluntly. Startups are chaos. Apex might not exist in 2 years. I know the risks. Do you? Because you've got a daughter, a good salary, stability. You're throwing that away for equity that might be worthless and a mission that might fail. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what matters over what's comfortable. Caleb kept his voice level. You taught me to solve the right problems, not just the easy ones. This is me applying that lesson. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. Fair enough. Just promise me something. If it doesn't work out, you'll call. We'll find a place for you here. I appreciate that. And take Marcus with you. He's been talking about jumping to startups for years but never had the guts. Maybe watching you do it will give him the push he needs. Chen smiled slightly. Go build something great, Caleb. Make us all look like cowards for playing it safe. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a rush of transition planning, knowledge transfer, and goodbye conversations. The 73-second chance hires threw him an impromptu gathering in the break room, presenting him with a card they'd all signed. One of them, a former project manager named Lisa, who'd spent 3 years caring for her father with dementia, pulled Caleb aside. You gave me my career back, she said quietly. I thought I was done. Thought the gap was too long, the explanations too complicated. You saw past all that and gave me a chance. Whatever you build next, it's going to be amazing. Caleb's last day at Hale Industries was a Friday in mid-November. He cleaned out his office, boxing up the few personal items he'd accumulated, photos of Emma, the card from the second chance hires, a framed copy of his first paycheck that he'd kept as a reminder of how far he'd come. Richard Hale appeared in the doorway as Caleb was taping the last box closed. One final thing before you go. Hale held out a small wooden box. Open it. Inside was a silver watch, elegant and understated. The engraving on the back read, For recognizing worth when others couldn't. R.H. Mr. Hale, I can't, you can, and you will. It's not a gift. It's a reminder. Every time you look at it, remember that recognizing human potential is the most important work any leader can do. Hale's expression was serious. You're going to face moments of doubt, Caleb. Times when the numbers don't work, when people question your judgment, when the safe path looks very appealing. In those moments, remember why you jumped. Remember that some things are worth the risk. Caleb slipped the watch onto his wrist. It fit perfectly. I'll remember. Good. Now get out of here before I change my mind and chain you to your desk. Caleb started at Apex Dynamics on a Monday morning in late November. The office was a converted warehouse in the industrial district, all exposed brick and high ceilings, with the chaotic energy of a company being built in real time. Engineers clustered around whiteboards covered in equations. The kitchen was stocked with energy drinks and cheap coffee. Desks were mismatched furniture acquired secondhand. It was perfect. Jennifer found him standing in what would be his office, a glass-walled space overlooking the main engineering floor, and grinned. Welcome to the chaos. Ready to build something from scratch? More ready than I've been for anything in years. Good. Because Michael wants the first 10 hires made by January. Think you can do that? Caleb thought about the hundreds of applications sitting in his email from people who'd heard about the Second Chance initiative and wanted to be part of whatever came next. Engineers who'd been laid off and couldn't get callbacks. Project managers who'd taken parental leave and found themselves unhireable. Skilled workers dismissed by algorithms that couldn't see past surface-level gaps. I can do that, Caleb said. He spent the first week building the infrastructure, interview protocols that focused on problem-solving rather than perfect resumes, evaluation criteria that weighted character and adaptability alongside technical skills, onboarding processes designed to help people succeed rather than filter them out. By December, he'd hired 8 engineers, 2 project managers, and a senior systems analyst, all through approaches that would have been rejected by traditional HR departments. One of the hires was Marcus Hall from Hale Industries, who'd finally worked up the courage to make the leap. Another was Lisa, the project manager who'd spoken at Caleb's goodbye gathering. A third was a former Air Force pilot who'd spent 2 years recovering from injuries sustained in combat and couldn't convince civilian aerospace companies he was still capable. Each one brought skills the company desperately needed and gratitude for being recognized when others had looked past them. By February, Apex Dynamics had 23 employees and had secured its first major contract, a $15 million development project with a defense contractor. Michael Torres called an all-hands meeting to announce the news. "This contract validates everything we've bet on," Torres said, standing on a makeshift stage in the warehouse. "It means we're not just dreaming, we're building something real. And that's because of the talent in this room. People who took risks to be here, who believed in what we're creating, who refused to accept that conventional wisdom was the only path forward." The room erupted in applause. Caleb stood in the back, watching the team he'd helped assemble celebrate a milestone that moved them from startup dream to legitimate company. Jennifer found him after the meeting. "We did it. Actually did it. We survived the first 6 months. That's different from long-term success." Always the optimist. She punched his shoulder lightly. "Enjoy the win, Caleb. You earned it." That evening, Caleb picked up Emma from school. She was in 2nd grade now, thriving academically and socially in ways that still amazed him, and took her to their favorite pizza place to celebrate. "Your company got a big contract?" Emma asked, carefully pulling pepperoni off her slice and eating it separately. "We did. It means the company's going to keep growing. And you helped make that happen?" "I helped hire good people. They made it happen." Emma considered this seriously. "Mommy would be proud of you, not just for the job stuff, but for helping people." Caleb's throat tightened. "You think so?" "I know so. You're doing what she always said matters, making things better for people who need help." Emma took a bite of pizza. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I used to be scared all the time. When we lived in the old apartment and it was cold and you looked worried, I was scared we'd lose everything and have nowhere to go." She looked at him directly. "But I'm not scared anymore. Even when you left the safe job to try something new, I wasn't scared because I know you'll figure it out. You always do." The faith in her voice was absolute, unshakable. Caleb pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by how much his daughter had grown, how resilient she'd become, how much courage it took for her to trust him after everything they'd been through. "I love you, Emma, more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Daddy. Now let me finish my pizza before it gets cold." Spring brought new challenges and unexpected growth. Apex Dynamics hired 15 more people, expanded to a 2nd floor in the warehouse, and began work on 2 additional contracts. Caleb's talent system was working exactly as designed. Retention was perfect, performance exceeded expectations, and the culture was collaborative rather than competitive. In April, a reporter from Tech Week magazine reached out wanting to do a profile on Apex's innovative hiring practices. The resulting article, published in June, was titled "The Second Chance Company: How One Aerospace Startup is Rewriting the Rules of Talent Acquisition." The piece detailed Caleb's journey from selling his wedding ring to building a revolutionary talent system, profiled several Apex employees who'd been overlooked by traditional hiring processes, and questioned why more companies weren't adopting similar approaches. It was well-researched, thoughtful, and went viral within the aerospace and tech industries. Caleb's phone started ringing the day the article published, HR directors wanting advice on implementing similar programs, consultants offering partnership opportunities, other startups asking if he'd help them build their talent systems, and unexpectedly, Robert Kellerman from Hale Industries. "I read the article," Kellerman said without preamble when Caleb answered. "It was illuminating. I'm sure it was. I wanted to call and acknowledge that I was wrong. About the Second Chance initiative, about the risks, about your approach." Kellerman's voice was carefully professional. "The data you're generating at Apex validates everything you argued for. I let institutional bias and political considerations override good judgment." Caleb was silent for a moment, genuinely surprised. "I appreciate you saying that. Hale Industries is reopening the Second Chance initiative. Modified version, smaller scale, but the core concept is intact. Richard Hale pushed it through despite board resistance. He credited your work at Apex for proving the model's viability. That's good news. It is. And I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to consult with us on implementation, paid engagement, proper contract, full credit for the intellectual framework. You built this. You should benefit from its expansion. Caleb thought about his initial resentment toward Kellerman, the frustration of having his program killed, the satisfaction of proving it worked elsewhere. All of that seemed distant now, less important than the practical question of helping more people. I'll consider it. Send me the proposal and I'll review it with my team. Thank you. And Caleb, congratulations on what you've built. It's genuinely impressive. After hanging up, Caleb sat looking at the watch Richard Hale had given him months ago. The reminder to recognize worth when others couldn't. He'd built a company around that principle, and now it was spreading beyond Apex's walls, changing how other organizations thought about talent. In July, Michael Torres called Caleb into his office with news that would reshape everything again. "We got an acquisition offer," Torres said without preamble. "Barrett Aerospace. $300 million, mostly cash, some stock. They want our technology, our team, and specifically our talent development system." Caleb sat down slowly. $300 million? Your equity's worth about $8 million at that valuation. Life-changing money. Torres leaned back in his chair. But there's a condition. They want you to stay on and expand the talent system across their entire organization. 50,000 employees. Full authority, executive-level position, essentially unlimited budget. When do they need an answer? We're voting in 2 weeks. Board's inclined to accept. It's a strong offer for a company our age. But I wanted you to know first because this changes your trajectory significantly. Caleb thought about $8 million. About financial security beyond anything he'd imagined when he was selling his wedding ring 18 months ago. About Emma's college fund, retirement, the ability to help others the way Richard Hale had helped him. But he also thought about what acceptance would mean. Returning to corporate structure, navigating politics again, building within someone else's constraints rather than his own vision. "If we accept," Caleb said slowly, "I want conditions. The talent system gets implemented my way, without compromise. I report directly to the CEO, not through HR. And we bring our entire current team with us. No one gets left behind. I'll negotiate those terms. If they agree, are you in?" Caleb looked out Torres's window at the warehouse floor, at the team he'd helped build, at people working on projects that mattered because someone had recognized their worth when conventional wisdom hadn't. "If they agree to the terms, I'm in." Barrett Aerospace agreed to everything. The acquisition closed in September, and Caleb suddenly found himself Senior Vice President of Global Talent Development at a Fortune 500 company with a mandate to transform how they thought about hiring. The first thing he did was reach out to every Second Chance Initiative hire from Hale Industries, every person who'd been part of the pilot program, and offer them positions at Barrett if they wanted to move. 43 of the original 73 accepted. The second thing he did was call Richard Hale. "I heard about the acquisition," Hale said when he answered. "Congratulations. $8 million is a good outcome." "It's more than good. It's transformative." Caleb paused. "I wanted to thank you for stopping in that pawn shop, for asking a question when you had no reason to care about my answer, for seeing something worth investing in when I couldn't see it myself." "You're welcome. But you did the work, Caleb. I just removed an obstacle. You removed the obstacle that mattered most, and I want to pay forward what you gave me." Caleb took a breath. "I'm creating a foundation, the Second Chance Foundation, dedicated to helping people who've been systematically excluded from opportunities because of employment gaps, economic hardship, circumstances beyond their control. Job training, placement assistance, financial support during transition periods. I'm seeding it with $2 million from the acquisition proceeds." Hale was silent for a moment. "That's extraordinary, Caleb." "It's necessary. There are thousands of people out there like I was, capable, desperate, invisible to systems designed to filter them out. I can't help everyone, but I can help some, and maybe inspire others to do the same." "You already have." The article about Apex sparked conversations across multiple industries. Companies are rethinking their hiring practices because you proved a better model exists. Hale's voice carried something that might have been pride. "You've created ripples that will reach further than you can see." I learned from the best. After hanging up, Caleb sat in his new office, corner suite, executive floor, views that stretched for miles, and thought about how far he'd come. From a pawn shop in November rain to the top floor of a Fortune 500 company. From selling a wedding ring for $45 to having $8 million in the bank. From desperate and invisible to influential and secure. But the journey wasn't really about the money or the title. It was about proving that human worth couldn't be measured by algorithms, that character and resilience mattered more than perfect resumes, that one person's willingness to recognize potential could change everything. His phone buzzed, a text from Emma, now 8 years old and growing more independent every day. "Dad, can Sarah from school come over this weekend? Her mom said it's okay if you say yes." Caleb smiled and typed back, "Of course. Tell Sarah we'll order pizza and watch movies." 3 dots appeared. Then, "You're the best. Love you." That weekend, Caleb watched Emma and her friend build elaborate blanket forts in the living room of the house they'd bought in the suburbs. 3 bedrooms, a real yard, a neighborhood where kids played outside without worry. The house was warm, the refrigerator was full, and Emma's medical bills were paid in full with premium insurance that covered everything. But more than the material security, what struck Caleb was the sound of his daughter's laughter. Bright and unguarded, the way children should laugh when they're not carrying adult worries about money and survival. That night, after Emma's friend went home, and Emma herself was asleep in her own room with its full bookshelves and art supplies, Caleb stood in his home office looking at the items he'd saved from every stage of the journey. The pawn shop receipt for $45. The wedding ring, back on his finger where it belonged. Richard Hale's business card, worn from being carried in his wallet for months. The watch Hale had given him. The first paycheck from Hale Industries, framed. The Tech Week magazine article about Apex. The acquisition announcement from Barrett Aerospace. Each item told part of a story about falling and rising, about losing everything and rebuilding better than before, about one stranger's intervention creating opportunities for hundreds of people. But the most important item was the photo on his desk. Sarah, Caleb, and baby Emma, taken 6 months before the diagnosis. Before the collapse. Before the long crawl back to stability. Sarah would never see what her family had become. Would never know that the man who'd sold his wedding ring in desperation had built a career on giving second chances to people who deserved them. Would never see her daughter thriving, confident, unafraid. But Caleb hoped, somewhere, somehow, she knew, that she'd watched him refuse to break when breaking would have been easier, that she'd seen him choose dignity over bitterness, purpose over comfort, helping others over protecting himself. "We made it," Caleb whispered to the photo. "Emma's safe. We're stable. And I'm doing work that matters. I kept the promises I made to you." His phone rang. Richard Hale calling at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. "Caleb, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. Everything okay?" "More than okay. I wanted to let you know that the Second Chance Foundation received its first major donation. Anonymous donor, $5 million, with a note saying the donor believed in recognizing worth when conventional wisdom couldn't." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "Mr. Hale, I have no idea who the donor is," Hale said, his voice carrying the faintest hint of amusement. "But I thought you should know the foundation's going to be able to help a lot more people than you initially projected." "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "Then don't say it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep recognizing potential that others miss. Keep proving that character matters more than credentials. Keep being the person I saw in that pawn shop." A pause. "You've exceeded every hope I had when I intervened that day, Caleb. Now go exceed your own." After hanging up, Caleb sat in his office for a long time, thinking about chains of impact, about how one act of recognition could ripple forward through dozens of lives, about the responsibility that came with being given a second chance. He thought about the hundreds of people who would benefit from the foundation, who would get opportunities they'd been systematically denied, who would prove that employment gaps and hard circumstances had nothing to do with capability or worth. He thought about Emma, asleep upstairs, safe and stable and thriving, because a stranger had stopped him outside a pawn shop and asked what he'd do if someone gave him a real chance. And he thought about tomorrow, when he'd go to Barrett Aerospace and continue building systems designed to recognize human potential, to look past algorithmic bias, to see people rather than data points. The wedding ring on his finger caught the light, white gold, worn thin, marked by years of love and loss and survival. It had been worth $45 to a pawnshop owner who couldn't see past scrap value. But to the person who'd recognized what it represented, who'd bought it back and returned it with respect rather than pity, it had been priceless. Just like the man who'd sold it, just like the daughter he was raising, just like every person who'd ever been dismissed by systems designed to filter out risk rather than recognize potential. Caleb stood, turned off his office light, and went upstairs to check on Emma one last time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, breathing easy in the warm room that would stay warm all winter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that second chances weren't charity, but investments in overlooked excellence. Tomorrow he'd help more people climb back from circumstances that had knocked them down. But tonight Caleb simply stood in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep, and let himself feel the full weight of how far they'd come. From desperation to stability, from invisible to influential, from a pawnshop transaction to a transformed life, all because one person had chosen to recognize worth when the world had decided there was none. And now Caleb spent every day doing the same for others, paying forward the grace that had saved him, proving that the best investment any person could make was believing in another person's potential when circumstances suggested otherwise. The circle was complete, but the impact continued to spread, touching lives in ways neither Caleb nor Richard Hale would ever fully see. Which was exactly how it should be. Some things couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or profit margins. Some things only showed up in the sound of a child's unguarded laughter, in the confidence of someone rebuilding after collapse, in the quiet dignity of people who refused to let hardship define their worth. Those were the metrics that mattered. And by those metrics, the investment had paid dividends beyond calculation.